Monster fillets, 18-ounce biaxial fiberglass, peel ply, and coating the inside of the boat with a layer of epoxy. It all happens right here. I'm Alan Mulholland. I'm a solo sailor, and this is the story of how I built my Wave Rover 650. 3 years ago, I refitted a 40-year-old Contessa 26 and took her on an amazing 7,800 nautical mile ocean voyage. We crossed the Atlantic twice, but a knockdown on the second crossing and COVID-19 put an end to my solo circumnavigation. So now, I'm building a new boat, smaller, lighter, but more suited for a solo circumnavigation. The Wave Rover 650. Ahoy Rovers! Well, in the last week you saw me make those big fillets over the chines and also the transom and stem area. And then I covered them in biaxial cloth, 18-ounce biaxial cloth. Really big job. That stuff really soaks up the epoxy. Then I covered that in peel ply. So in this week, I'll be removing that peel ply. Now you might be asking, what's all the fuss about that biaxial? Well, the biaxial really is a structural joint. We have it on the inside of the chine and the outside of the chine, and in between there we have a big epoxy fillet. So what we've created at that point is basically a fiberglass boat. So the reason to have the fiberglass boat at the chine, because there are other ways of doing this. You can do it with a wooden stringer, but the wooden stringer has a tendency to let water get caught. It's a water trap. And if you love your boat, you're going to remove those stringers and you're going to do these fillets with the heavy fiberglass cloth, and that becomes a structural joint between those two members. Anyway, in this episode, we're stripping that peel ply off. Then we're going to do a little bit of prep work on it if needed. And then we will be painting the inside of the boat with a thin special purpose epoxy. And the reason for that is because we love our boat and we want our boat to last, so that if it's waterproofed on the inside, it's not going to rot from the inside out. Anyway, a lot to do. Time to crack on. Well, Rovers, I'm inside the 650 right now. I'm right around the area where the cockpit would end and the cabin would start. Now, what I'm doing inside today is I've already swept down all the sawdust that was in here, and it was quite a bit, and I've vacuumed it up, and I'm wiping everything down. But just a little background on this. So this morning when I hopped in the car to come to the boat shed, it was minus 28 Celsius. That is really, really cold for this part of Canada. It is January 22nd, it is wintertime, so we shouldn't be too surprised by cold temperatures, but that was pretty cold. It was minus 10 in the womb when I got in here, but we didn't have heat on. And I've turned heat on inside the boat area with the tarp over top, and in about 3 hours the temperature got up to about 15 to 18 degrees. So I need those temperatures for tomorrow when I put the epoxy sealer on, which is the whole idea behind the big cleanup I'm doing. But right now I'm just washing down the sides and all the plywood with just water and a rag. And when I say washing down, what I mean is just a damp rag, and I'll demonstrate that. So you want to make sure your rag is damp. So I've already done this area. I'm just doing the area between the chines. Change up your surfaces. Now you might be saying, oh my goodness, that plywood is wet. How are you going to paint it? No problem. This plywood will be dry in about 15 to 20 minutes. I'm also wiping down all the surfaces that have been fiberglassed. I think you get the idea, and don't be afraid of changing up your water. This is actually the third amount of water I'm using on this. But the area I started with this morning, this morning about 45 minutes ago, is all dry. I've worked my way around. So the next step is to mark out where all the bulkheads and frames are going. So I've got my laser set up, and it's on. And from a previous video you would have seen me mark the water line, and you can just see it there with the laser. It's intersecting the center line and the water line. I've got the tape measure pushed up against it, and then I'm pulling out, I have to have the tape measure at a level line because of the curvature of the bottom, because all my measurements for the bulkheads are they're done like this, a level line, like a water line. So I'm marking those now on the floor, and I'll show you how I go about that. So I have notes right here on where all the bulkheads are located on the center line. And the next one is located at 6 feet. So I just take my level, my hand level, my Sharpie, and I hold the level up to the six foot point, and then I make the level plumb. So there we go. The level is now, the level is now plumb. It's at 6 feet, and I just make a little line. And so that's the third bulkhead. I've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now that I know where the bulkhead will be traversing across the boat, I need to get a line going that's perpendicular to my center line. So in a previous video you saw me lay down the center line before I put this fiberglass down. So I've lined up the square on the center line. I can still see it clearly. And then I'm just going to make a little line like that. And then I'll do the same heading this direction. So line it up again, and this is a way of double checking your work. Let's see, there we go. There we go. Okay. Now that we've established this perpendicular line, we can take our laser level again and turn it on. Switch it to plumb. There we go. Line it up over our line. And I'm just going to change the camera angle so you can see what's happening here. So there's our center line on the boat along here. Here's our athwartship line for a bulkhead. And then you can see the laser is laying out a nice plumb line right up the side. And now I'll just trace that with a Sharpie and I'll know exactly where plumb is because we've already leveled the boat. So this is pretty straightforward stuff. Okay, so there we go. We'll just make a few lines on it. Okay, we should be able to connect those with just a straight edge. And that's bulkhead number 1, 2, 3. Well, the next few are on a fairly level surface, so I can just measure them straight out like this. So checking my notes as I go. That's it. All the bulkhead layouts, all the ring frames have all been taken care of. All the lines are on here, they're plumb. I have all my measurements set to go now. It's time to put a thin coat of epoxy over top of all the plywood surfaces. So now I'm ready in all respects to start painting the inside of the boat, and I'm using this System 3 S1, which is a 2-part epoxy in 2 identical containers, and you know what that means. You don't want to mix them up. So I have marked them very carefully with part A on the cap so I don't put part B's cap on there. I also have my 2 mixing containers marked clearly with A and B. I've got my paint tray that I'll be painting from with a roller and a brush, and I also have some other rollers standing by. So and what I'm going to do is I'll take equal amounts, I'll mix it up in this steel can because they tell me the pot life on this is 24 hours. And you need temperatures of 15 degrees minimum. And what do we have? We have 15 on the button, but inside Wave Rover right now, it's probably more like 20 degrees because we have this tarp over top. All right, time to start mixing. Okay, so I'm ready to start mixing the S1 product, but I'm going to put my respirator on because this stuff is really thin, and the way they make it thin, from my understanding, is by mixing a lot of acetone into it that'll evaporate. So fairly strong fumes. So I'd like to take a moment to honor the Wave Rover benefactors. So what is a benefactor? Well, these folks have made a contribution of $100 US or more to the project, and their names will be affixed to a bulkhead inside Wave Rover and will be traveling with me on our circumnavigation. Now, these donations truly are much appreciated. Well, Rovers, you saw me put that S1 product on, and you saw me putting this mask on. Now, this mask, it's a 3M mask, and it has particulate filters on right now, which are great at stopping dust or fine epoxy dust, when you sand, but they're not meant for vapors. I just want to get out ahead of this before anybody writes a comment. So the type of mask or filters rather that you should be using are filters that are organic vapor filters. They would have an OV. And I realized that pretty rapidly when I was inside the boat painting, because in order for that sealer to stay as thin as it was, it had a lot of solvents mixed into it, most likely acetone. Now, regular epoxy doesn't have that. There's a very slow release of solvents from regular epoxy, and that's why it's pretty safe to work with epoxy without a mask. Now, I'm not saying that wearing a mask is bad. In fact, wearing a mask is fine, but when you deal with a sealer or a paint, the thing that keeps it thin, like I said, are those solvents. So there's a lot of gases, a lot of vapor coming off the epoxy. That's why you ought to be wearing a mask with filters that say OV on them, which stands for organic vapor. And that will help filter those solvents before it gets to your lungs. Now, if you do inhale some acetone, it's what happens when ladies go to the nail salon and get their fingernails painted. That's acetone that's used to clean, so a little bit isn't bad for you. Your body has an amazing ability to filter these solvents and pass through. I actually looked that up to just ensure what I'm saying is correct. However, common sense tells me that any concentration of any chemical is not good. So wear the correct filters when you're dealing with those thin epoxies. Until next time, Rovers, thanks for watching. Well, Mr. Speckles and I would like to take a moment to thank all the Wave Rover patrons whose pledges of support help power the Wave Rover project. Now, if you'd like to know more about Wave Rover's patron page and benefactors bulkhead, I have links to both those pages in the video description. Now, another way to help Wave Rover, and it doesn't cost you a dime, is by sharing our content on your social media. So now, as always, Rovers, thanks for watching. Give us one more.